First contact at the games. The crystalline spires of the Centauri Games complex caught the last rays of the triple sunset, casting prismatic shadows across the bustling concourse. Commander Sarah Chen adjusted her formal dress uniform's collar, the silver oak leaves on her shoulders catching the light. After 20 years leading humanity's first deep space exploration teams, she'd seen her share of wonders, but the Grand Galactic Games still managed to take her breath away. "Pardon, honored human," a melodious voice chimed from behind. Sarah turned to find a towering Meriday diplomat, their bioluminescent patterns shifting in what she recognized as a formal greeting. "I believe you're here for the Strategy Games division." "That's right," Sarah replied with a practiced smile. "Earth's official observer for the Quantum Chess Championships." What she didn't mention was that she was also here to evaluate potential new technologies and alliances. Even in retirement, old habits died hard. The Meriday's patterns flickered in what might have been amusement. "Then you'll want to watch the junior qualifying rounds. There's a young competitor causing quite a stir." Sarah's interest piqued. In her experience, quite a stir at the games usually meant either a diplomatic incident brewing or something extraordinary. Either way, it warranted investigation. Following the Meriday's directions, she made her way to a smaller arena off the main concourse. The qualifying matches for junior competitors took place here, away from the grandeur and pressure of the main event. As she entered, she immediately noticed something unusual. A crowd had gathered around one of the quantum chessboards, but their attention wasn't focused on the game itself. Instead, they were fixated on one of the competitors, a young Zextal, his crystalline form refracting light in unusual patterns. Unlike the typical smooth, geometric shapes of his species, this youth's crystal structure showed irregular formations and hairline fractures. Sarah moved closer, her tactical mind automatically analyzing the situation. The Zextal youth was competing against a Volox master strategist, their tentacled form hovering over the quantum chessboard with practiced confidence. But something was wrong. The young Zextal's movements were hesitant, not from uncertainty about his next move, but from what appeared to be physical difficulty. As she watched, he reached for a piece, and a visible tremor ran through his crystalline form. A few in the crowd murmured, some with concern, others with what sounded like disapproval. But what caught Sarah's attention was the game itself. Despite his physical struggles, the young Zextal was playing brilliantly. "Remarkable, isn't it?" A quiet voice spoke beside her. Sarah turned to find Dr. Venn, one of the game's chief medical officers and an old acquaintance. The Auroran's feathered crest rippled in what she recognized as concern. "What's his story?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice low. "Crystal, a prodigy with a curse," Venn replied. "He has a rare genetic condition that makes his crystalline structure unstable. Most Zextal would consider it a devastating disability. But his mind..." The doctor trailed off as Crystal executed a move that sent a ripple of surprise through the crowd. Sarah watched as the young alien's quantum chess pieces danced across multiple probability states, weaving a strategy so complex it took her breath away. This wasn't just good playing. This was genius-level strategic thinking. The game concluded with Crystal's victory, though few seemed surprised by the outcome. What happened next, however, caught Sarah's full attention. As Crystal attempted to rise from his seat, his crystalline leg structure emanated a dangerous creaking sound. Several spectators quickly backed away, their reactions ranging from concern to barely disguised revulsion. Without hesitation, Sarah moved forward, reaching the young alien's side just as his leg structure threatened to give way entirely. "May I?" she asked, offering her arm for support. Crystal's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise or embarrassment. It was hard to read Zextal expressions, but he accepted her help with a graceful nod. "Thank you, honored human," he said, his voice carrying the musical resonance typical of his species, though with an undertone of strain. As she helped him move away from the game area, Sarah's mind was already racing with possibilities. She'd seen that look in the crowd before, the mixture of amazement at Crystal's brilliant play and discomfort at his condition. It was the same look she'd encountered early in her career when humanity first joined the galactic community. The look that said, "Impressive, but not quite what we're looking for." "That was exceptional playing," she said as they reached a quieter area. "I've never seen anyone manipulate quantum probability fields quite like that." Crystal's crystalline form shifted in what she interpreted as modest embarrassment. "The game helps me forget," he said quietly. "When I'm playing, I'm not broken. I'm just me." Sarah felt something stir in her chest, that familiar mix of indignation and determination that had driven her throughout her career. "You're not broken," she said firmly. "You're playing at a level most beings can only dream of achieving. But I'm curious, have you considered competing in the main tournament?" The young alien's form dimmed slightly. "The games committee, they suggest it would be too dangerous. For myself and others, crystal fractures can be explosive." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, memories of her engineering background surfacing. "What if there was a way to stabilize your structure, to let you compete safely?" Crystal's form brightened momentarily before dimming again. "Many have tried. The best medical minds in the galaxy say it's impossible." A smile tugged at Sarah's lips. If there was one thing humans had taught the galaxy, it was that impossible was often just a challenge waiting to be overcome. "Well," she said, "they haven't tried working with humans yet. We have a certain reputation for doing the impossible." And as the last light of the triple suns faded, casting the game's complex in the glow of artificial illumination, Commander Sarah Chen began formulating a plan. She might have retired from active service, but this was exactly the kind of challenge she lived for, breaking the crystal ceiling. The game's committee chamber hummed with the subtle vibrations of a dozen different species shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Sarah Chen stood before them, her presentation hanging in the air as a holographic display. Behind her, Crystal waited quietly, his crystalline form catching the light from the chamber's illumination panels. "Absolutely not," rumbled High Commissioner Dex Thor, his metallic scales reflecting his agitation. "The liability alone would be astronomical. One crystal fracture in the main arena could injure dozens of spectators." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though she felt her jaw tighten. She'd expected resistance, but the complete dismissal was frustrating. "With respect, Commissioner, I've reviewed every safety regulation in the game's charter. Nowhere does it specifically prohibit competitors with genetic conditions, provided adequate safety measures are in place." "Because no one has ever been foolish enough to suggest it," interrupted Council Member Xylax, their gelatinous form rippling with what Sarah had learned to recognize as condescension. "The games celebrate excellence, Commander Chen. They are not a rehabilitation program." Sarah felt rather than saw Crystal dim behind her. She took a deep breath, remembering similar arguments from humanity's early days in the galactic community. "Excellence." She gestured to the holographic display, which showed recordings of Crystal's recent matches. "In the past week, this young man has defeated 3 grandmasters in quantum chess. His strategic thinking is revolutionary. Isn't that exactly what the games celebrate?" A murmur ran through the chamber. Several committee members leaned forward, studying the recordings with renewed interest. Sarah pressed her advantage. "The game's charter speaks of unity through competition, of celebrating diverse talents across all species. Are we really living up to those ideals if we exclude competitors based on conditions they were born with?" "Pretty words, Commander," said Dex Thor, though his tone had softened slightly. "But they don't address the safety concerns. That's where humanity comes in." Sarah switched the display to show preliminary engineering schematics. "I've been in contact with engineers from both the Mars Institute of Technology and the Lunar Medical Center. We believe we can develop a containment suit that would stabilize Crystal's crystal structure while allowing full range of movement." The chamber erupted in overlapping voices. Sarah caught fragments of discussion, some dismissive, some intrigued, some openly hostile. But she noticed a few of the younger committee members nodding thoughtfully. Impossible, declared one of the senior members, a quantix whose mathematical abilities were legendary. The energy requirements alone were considered impossible until humanity developed quantum capacitors, Sarah interrupted smoothly. Just as faster than light travel was impossible until the Zextal discovered probability drives. Just as universal translation was impossible until the Meridae shared their linguistic algorithms. She paused, letting her words sink in. The games have always been about more than competition. They're about bringing together the best of all our species, about pushing boundaries and achieving what others thought impossible. Crystal stepped forward then, his voice carrying the musical resonance of his species despite his nervousness. Honored committee, I know the risks. I live with them every day. But I also know that I can contribute something unique to the games. All I ask is the chance to prove it. The chamber fell silent. Sarah watched as glances were exchanged. Subtle communications passed between species in ways she could only partially interpret. Finally, High Commissioner Dex Thor spoke. You have 2 standard months, Commander Chen. Develop your containment suit, prove it works, and demonstrate that it meets all safety requirements. If, and only if, you succeed, we will consider allowing young Crystal to compete in the main tournament. Sarah bowed formally, hiding her smile. 2 months wasn't much time, but she'd accomplished more with less during her military career. As she and Crystal left the chamber, she was already mentally composing messages to her contacts in the human engineering community. Later that evening, in a quiet corner of the games complex's botanical garden, Sarah found Crystal practicing quantum chess moves by himself. The holographic pieces danced through probability states, creating patterns she'd never seen before. That's an interesting strategy, she said, settling onto a bench nearby. I've never seen anyone use quantum superposition quite that way. Crystal's form brightened slightly. It's something I've been developing. When you can't move freely, you learn to see patterns others might miss. He paused, his crystal structure shifting in what Sarah had learned to recognize as uncertainty. Do you really think you can develop the containment suit in time? Sarah thought about all the impossible challenges humanity had faced since joining the galactic community. You know, when humans first reached the stars, many species thought we were too primitive to contribute anything meaningful. We were too young, too reckless, too different. She smiled at the memory. But that difference turned out to be our strength. We look at problems differently. Where others see impossibilities, we see puzzles waiting to be solved. Crystal's form pulsed with interest. And this puzzle, my condition, is exactly the kind of challenge humans excel at. Sarah stood, her mind already racing with possibilities. We're going to need to run some tests, gather data on exactly how your crystal structure behaves under different conditions, and I'll need to coordinate with our engineering teams. As she outlined her preliminary plans, she noticed Crystal's form growing brighter, his crystal structure almost singing with hope. It reminded her of why she joined the Space Force in the first place, not just to explore, but to make a difference. Commander Chen, Crystal said suddenly, his tone serious. Why are you doing this? Why help me? Sarah thought about the question carefully. Because every time we break down barriers between species, we all become stronger. Because talent shouldn't be wasted just because it comes in an unexpected package. She smiled. And because sometimes the best way to prove something's possible is to go ahead and do it. As the artificial night cycle began in the botanical garden, Commander and alien student continued their discussion, planning their assault on what the galaxy considered impossible. Above them, the holographic chess pieces continued their quantum dance, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful patterns emerge from the most unlikely combinations. The adaptation. The laboratory aboard the human research vessel, Prometheus, hummed with activity. Holographic displays filled the air with cascading data streams, while robotic arms precisely manipulated materials too dangerous for organic hands to touch. In the center of it all, suspended in a zero-gravity field, floated a crystalline structure that pulsed with an inner light. Try frequency modulation 7.3, Sarah called out, her eyes fixed on the readings scrolling across her neural interface. Behind protective barriers, Crystal watched intently as human scientists worked to understand the unique properties of his crystal structure. Dr. Elena Martinez, Earth's leading expert in xenomaterial engineering, adjusted the quantum resonance field. The crystal matrix is responding, but there's something we're missing. These microfractures shouldn't be propagating at this rate. Sarah frowned at the data. They'd been at this for 3 weeks, and while they'd made progress, they were still far from a working solution. Time was running out. Wait, Crystal's musical voice cut through the technical discussions. The fractures, they follow a pattern similar to quantum probability waves. What if you synchronize the containment field with my mental patterns instead of just my physical structure? The laboratory fell silent. Dr. Martinez's eyes widened. Of course, she breathed. We've been thinking about this all wrong. We're not just trying to contain a crystal structure. We're trying to stabilize a living, thinking being. Sarah watched as new possibilities unfolded in her mind. This was what humanity did best, looking at problems from unexpected angles, combining insights from different fields in ways no one had considered before. Crystal, she asked, when you play quantum chess, how do you visualize the probability fields? His crystal structure shifted, creating rainbow patterns across the lab. I don't just visualize them. I feel them, become part of them. It's like becoming one with the quantum state itself. Dr. Martinez was already recalibrating her instruments. If we could map those neural patterns and use them as a baseline for the containment field. She paused, her fingers flying over holographic controls. Commander, remember those quantum synchronization circuits we developed for the first human AI neural interfaces? Sarah nodded, beginning to see where this was going. If we adapted that technology, combined it with Zextal crystal resonance patterns. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. Human engineers worked alongside artificial intelligences, combining technologies in ways their creators had never imagined. The lab became a fusion of human intuition, alien biology, and advanced technology. Finally, as the ship's chronometers marked the beginning of another cycle, they were ready for the first test. The containment suit looked nothing like traditional environmental suits. It was more like a second skin, a lattice of quantum-aligned crystals and energy fields that seemed to flow like liquid light. Sarah helped Crystal make the final adjustments as the team ran through safety protocols one last time. Remember, Dr. Martinez cautioned, at the first sign of crystal destabilization, we abort immediately. We're not taking any unnecessary risks. Crystal's form pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as nervous excitement. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady despite his obvious anxiety. The activation sequence began. Quantum fields shimmered into existence, wrapping around Crystal's form like a cocoon of light. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, his crystal structure began to stabilize. The microfractures that had plagued him all his life started to align, strengthened by the quantum synchronized fields. Try moving, Sarah suggested softly. Crystal took a tentative step, then another. His movements, usually hesitant and careful, became more fluid. The constant risk of fracture that had dominated his life began to fade. The readings are incredible, Dr. Martinez announced, her voice thick with emotion. Complete structural stability at all stress points. The quantum synchronization is holding perfectly. Sarah watched as Crystal moved across the laboratory, his crystal form glowing with an inner light that seemed brighter than ever before. He reached the far wall, turned, and did something she'd never seen him do before. He laughed, the sound like chimes in a crystal cathedral. I can move, he said, wonder in his voice. I can really move. The human scientists broke into applause, their excitement infectious. But Sarah noticed something else. The way Crystal's movements were becoming more confident with each passing moment, the way his crystal structure seemed to be adapting to the suit's quantum fields. It's more than just containment, isn't it? she asked Dr. Martinez quietly. The suit's helping him learn to control his own structure. The scientist nodded. The quantum synchronization is creating a feedback loop. The more he uses it, the better he'll understand his own capabilities. We didn't just build him a safety device. We've given him a tool to grow stronger. As the team began running detailed diagnostics, Sarah received an urgent message from the games committee. They wanted a demonstration of the suit's capabilities, not in a controlled laboratory environment, but in actual competition conditions. "Are you ready for this?" she asked Crystal, showing him the message. "They're not going to make it easy." His crystal structure pulsed with determination. "Thanks to you, to all of you, I'm ready for anything." He paused, his next words carrying the weight of deep emotion. "You humans, you don't just solve problems. You transform them into opportunities." Sarah smiled, thinking of humanity's long journey to the stars. "That's because we learned long ago that our greatest strengths often come from our greatest challenges." She looked around the laboratory, at the fusion of human and alien technology that had created something entirely new. "Now, let's show the galaxy what's possible when we work together." As they began preparing for the demonstration that would determine Crystal's future in the games, Sarah couldn't help but feel proud. Not just of the technical achievement, but of what it represented. Humanity's gift for turning limitations into possibilities, for seeing potential where others saw only problems. The real test was yet to come, but they had already proved something important. In the vast tapestry of galactic civilization, sometimes the most beautiful patterns emerge from the threads that others thought were broken. Trial by fire. The main arena of the Grand Galactic Games towered above them, its crystalline architecture reflecting the light of 3 setting suns. Inside, thousands of beings from across the galaxy waited to witness what many were already calling either a breakthrough or a disaster in the making. Sarah stood with Crystal in the preparation chamber, running final diagnostics on the containment suit. The quantum field shimmered around him like liquid starlight, responding to his every movement with microscopic adjustments. The committees added extra challenges to the qualification course. Sarah said, reviewing the updated specifications. "They're not making this easy." Crystal's crystal structure pulsed with what she now recognized as determination. "They're afraid," he said simply. "Change never comes easily." The qualification course for the strategic division had been modified to include physical challenges alongside the mental ones. Competitors would need to navigate a complex obstacle course while solving multidimensional quantum puzzles. For most species, it was challenging. For a Zextal with Crystal's condition, it should have been impossible. "Remember," Sarah adjusted one final setting on the suit, "the quantum synchronization will adapt to your needs, but you need to trust it. Like in quantum chess. Feel the probabilities, become one with them." A chime sounded through the chamber. Their time was up. As they walked toward the arena entrance, Sarah noticed the other competitors watching them. Some with curiosity, others with barely concealed skepticism. A Merida competitor even pulled their teammate away as Crystal passed. The arena erupted in murmurs as they emerged. The massive holographic displays showed Crystal from every angle, his containment suit catching and refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. In the committee's private box, Sarah could see High Commissioner Dexthor leaning forward, his metallic scales gleaming with interest. Qualification Trial 7. The announcement echoed through the arena. "Competitors, take your positions." Sarah gave Crystal's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Show them what's possible." The course materialized around them, a 3-dimensional maze of energy barriers, gravity wells, and quantum puzzle nodes. Competitors would need to navigate the physical obstacles while solving complex strategic challenges at each node. Success required both mental acuity and physical precision. The signal sounded, and the trial began. Crystal moved with a grace that would have been impossible just weeks ago. The containment suit responded to his every thought, quantum fields adjusting microscopically to maintain perfect stability. He reached the first puzzle node, his crystal structure pulsing with concentration, as he manipulated the quantum probability fields. Other competitors were strong, their movements sure and their solutions swift, but none of them solved the puzzles quite like Kristall. Where others saw linear paths, he saw quantum possibilities. Where they calculated moves sequentially, he played in multiple probability states simultaneously. Then, halfway through the course, disaster struck. A surge in the arena's power grid caused a momentary fluctuation in the local gravity field. For most competitors, it was merely disorienting. For Kristall, it threatened catastrophe. His crystal structure began to resonate dangerously with the disrupted field. The crowd gasped. Several committee members rose from their seats. Sarah's heart stopped as she saw the readings on her neural interface spike into the red. But then something remarkable happened. Instead of fighting the resonance, Kristall embraced it. Just as he'd learned to do with the quantum chess pieces, he became one with the fluctuating fields. The containment suit responded instantly, its quantum synchronization adapting to the new patterns. His crystal structure began to glow with an inner light that seemed to pulse in time with the very fabric of space-time. In that moment, what could have been a disaster became a display of unprecedented mastery. Kristall moved through the remaining obstacles as if gravity itself was his partner in an elaborate dance. His solutions to the quantum puzzles became even more brilliant, incorporating the environmental instabilities into his strategies. When he reached the final node, the entire arena had fallen silent. Even his fellow competitors stood motionless, watching as he completed the last quantum puzzle with a flourish that turned the holographic display into a symphony of light and probability. The silence held for one heartbeat, then two. Then the arena erupted in thunderous applause. Species that had never found common ground on any issue united in their appreciation of what they had just witnessed. High Commissioner Dex Thor stood, his scales shimmering with what might have been emotion. Qualification Trial 7, his voice boomed through the arena, completed with the highest combined score in game's history. Sarah rushed to meet Kristall as he exited the course. His crystal structure was glowing with joy and exhaustion. "That wasn't exactly how we planned it," she said with a smile. "No," he agreed, his voice harmonizing with the hum of the containment suit. "It was better. I finally understood what you humans have been trying to teach me. Our limitations don't define us. How we respond to them does." As medical teams confirmed his stability and fellow competitors came forward to offer congratulations, Sarah noticed something else. The way other beings were looking at Kristall had changed. Where before they had seen something broken, now they saw something extraordinary. A junior Zextal competitor approached hesitantly, their own crystal structure showing signs of a different but similarly challenging condition. Their eyes were fixed on Kristall with an expression Sarah recognized immediately: hope. In that moment, she understood that they had achieved something far more important than qualifying for a competition. They had shown the galaxy that differences weren't weaknesses to be hidden, but opportunities for innovation and growth. The containment suit sparkled in the arena lights, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. But the real breakthrough wasn't in the technology. It was in the minds and hearts of those who witnessed what it had helped achieve. As the arena buzzed with excitement and speculation about the upcoming tournament, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. Sometimes the greatest victories weren't in proving others wrong, but in showing them new possibilities they had never dared to imagine. A new dawn. 1 year after Kristall's historic qualification, the Grand Galactic Games complex had changed. Where once there had been rigid uniformity, now diversity flourished. Beings of all species, some wearing variations of the quantum containment technology, moved freely through its halls. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck, watching a new generation of competitors prepare for their trials. The quantum containment technology had evolved, adapted for different species and conditions. What had started as a solution for one young Zextal had become a gateway for countless others who had previously been excluded from galactic society. "Quite a view, isn't it?" A familiar crystalline voice chimed behind her. Sarah turned to find Kristall, his form now adorned with the markings of a games instructor. The containment suit had evolved with him, becoming less visible but more sophisticated. It was now less a protective shell and more an extension of his own being. "Hard to believe it's only been a year," she replied, watching a young Volox athlete with modified gravity stabilizers practicing complex maneuvers below. The committee's integration division is reviewing applications from species we never thought could participate. Crystal's crystal structure pulsed with quiet pride. "Yesterday I received a message from a Quantix colony in the Outer Rim. They have a whole group of youngsters with probability perception disorders, conditions that were once considered devastating disabilities. Now, with adapted versions of the containment technology, they're seeing their differences as strengths," Sarah finished, smiling. The Quantix, with their mathematical biology, had been among the first to recognize the potential of the quantum synchronization technology for their own people. They moved through the complex, passing training areas where beings of all species work together, sharing techniques and technologies. In one chamber, a Meriday instructor with modified neural interfaces was teaching a group of students how to manipulate quantum probability fields. Among them was the young Zextal who had approached Crystal after his qualification trial, now moving with confidence in their own containment suit. "The human engineers have been remarkable," Crystal noted as they watched. "Every time we discover a new application for the technology, they find ways to improve it, to make it more accessible." Sarah nodded. "That's always been humanity's gift to the galaxy, not just solving problems, but transforming how we think about them." She paused as they reached the main arena, where preparations were underway for this year's opening ceremony. "Though I have to admit, even I didn't expect things to change this quickly." The arena had been modified to accommodate competitors of all abilities. Quantum field generators maintained localized environments for different species' needs. Holographic interfaces adapted to various forms of sensory perception. It was a far cry from the rigid, standardized venue of the previous year. High Commissioner Dexthor was waiting for them near the committee's box, his metallic scales now adorned with the symbols of the newly formed Universal Access Initiative. "Commander Chen," he greeted them, his formerly rigid diplomatic tone warmed by genuine respect. "The human delegation has arrived with the latest proposals for expanding the integration program." "And?" Sarah asked, though she could guess from his expression. "Unanimously approved," he replied, "including the funding for the new Adaptive Technologies Research Center." He turned to Crystal. "Your demonstration last year didn't just change the games, it changed how we think about potential itself." As they discussed the details of the new initiatives, Sarah noticed a group of young competitors watching them from nearby. They came from different species, each wearing some variation of adaptive technology. In their eyes, she saw the same look she'd seen in Crystal's when they'd first started their journey, hope mixed with determination. "You know," Crystal said later, as they watched the sunset from the botanical garden, where they'd once planned their impossible challenge, "I used to think my condition was a curse, that I was meant to watch life from the sidelines." Sarah smiled, remembering their first meeting. "And now?" His crystal structure shimmered with joy. "Now I understand what you humans seemed to know all along, that our greatest challenges can become our greatest gifts to others." He gestured to the complex around them, where beings of all kinds moved freely, their differences celebrated rather than hidden. "We didn't just create a new technology. We created a new way of seeing each other." As the artificial night cycle began, illuminating the complex with its soft glow, Sarah reflected on humanity's role in the galaxy. They hadn't just brought new technologies or solutions, they'd brought hope. The willingness to see possibility where others saw limitations, to transform barriers into bridges. The next day's opening ceremony would feature the largest and most diverse group of competitors in games history. But the real victory wasn't in the numbers or the technical achievements. It was in the understanding that had spread through galactic society. That strength comes in many forms, that differences can be advantages, and that sometimes the most beautiful achievements come from those who dare to challenge what others call impossible. As they watched a group of young competitors practicing below, Their various adaptive technologies working in harmony, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was learning what humanity had known all along, that the future belongs not to those who fit a predetermined mold, but to those who dare to break it and create something new. The games would go on, but they would never be the same. And in that change lay the promise of a galaxy where every being, regardless of their form or ability, could find their path to excellence.